Now, calling to order the meeting of the Faculty Advisory Committee to the Board of Regents of the Connecticut State Colleges and Universities for Friday, September 9th. It's 1 p.m. and we are recording now. So you have the agenda, to which there was just one added item. That is item 4B, FAC Conference. Update, and added to that is 5B, joint meeting of the FAC and BOR, which we need to schedule and determine in terms of topics. So with that small amendment, which was posted publicly, could I have a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting?
I'll move to approve. It's Mary Beth.
Okay, thank you. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
One eye will do it. Those opposed say nay. Okay, that's approved. Let's go to the minutes. I'm sorry I was late in getting them to you, but you do have it in an email attachment from earlier or later this morning. But I can put it on share. And I think you have it there. And I'll just briefly go through it, just in case you haven't had time to see it. Whoops, sorry. I've lost my cursor. The co-chair report from the community colleges was on the realignment of the regional presidents who have become executive vice presidents. Also, notice on the Nicole Esposito being reinstated as CEO of Manchester, and further details on those two circumstances. There was the resolution on department chairs, which was quite important, right? And we'll come back to that, I suspect, when Kalina is talking about the latest report to NESHI by CSCU or CSCC. The accreditations of constituent 12 CT community colleges. That was the question, I guess, more generally, of guaranteeing that the 12 community colleges continue to exist, whatever NESHI may decide with respect to the accreditation of CSCC. And again, that's an issue to which no doubt we will return. There was a fairly complete report from Rotua on the situation at Western, and you have it there. I won't go and repeat it all, but it's, I think, very well summarized. And it's clearly a matter to which we're going to return today. COVID-19, that was the executive committee resolution, which had been amended by one of the members of the board to not merely defer to the governor and the legislature, but also to require the CSCU president to act on issues within the system as necessary. We had a preliminary discussion on the FAC conference. And then there was a question about the critique we had made of the formulation of FAC participation, or rather the fact that we had not approved the strategic plan for the one community college. So those were the minutes. Well done as usual by Lois. Are there any modifications to it? There you have the list of people who are present and those who are absent. If not, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So move. This is vote.
Okay, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay.
Get it printed. I didn't push print, but
That's not our.
Those opposed say nay. Fine, that's approved. Let's move now to the agenda. The first item
okay.
is the report on the community colleges. So I'm going to stop sharing in case Kalina wants to share anything. But Kalina, this is your part.
Somehow, I don't know how to fix this. Because you're on OneNote or OneDrive, whatever, and it's set up
to go to your printer there, so I'd have to fuck around with this to get it.
Can you mute
It's not wrong, it's just.
David?
So,
Yeah, Carmen, I think you got background coming in. Thank you. Okay, Kalina, go ahead.
Sure. All right, so I forget in what order, I'm not looking at the agenda right now, but in what order you had the various topics, David, but I guess we could begin with the NETCHI submission.
That was the first one.
Yes, okay. And if you'll indulge me, I feel like it might be beneficial to quickly run through the things, the bullet points that stood out to me that might affect the way that we engage with our jobs right now, and also to kind of characterize where we are for university folks who may not necessarily be taking the time to read through these submissions. So I will do that quickly. I hope it doesn't take too long. So just run through any bullet points, and then I hope we'll have time to discuss after. And yes, okay. All right, so I'll just start here. So given the reorganization that eliminated the regional positions, the CEOs are going to be reporting centrally to the Connecticut State Cabinet from now on, or for this year, while they figure out what the balance between like local and centralized authority are. And I'm really just like pulling from the NETCHI report, the way it's characterized there, right? Advising and financial aid will continue to have a regional structure. So those will remain. They note that colleges that implemented guided pathways first are seeing retention gains. However, they seem to fail to mention that the colleges that did not are seeing equivalent or better gains. And they did this at the Higher Ed Consolidation Committee earlier in the year also. So Allison Buckley reported that the fall 21 to spring 22 retention for Housatonic was 8 percentage points. And what they failed to mention was that the retention for the same period at the other two Shoreline West colleges where guided pathways was not implemented was in the same range or marginally better, right? So at Gateway, it was 9 percentage points. At Norwalk, it's 10 percentage points. And neither Gateway nor Norwalk has implemented guided pathways. So there are claims about retention rates being attributed to guided pathways, and then indications that it should increase even further as guided pathways is implemented at other colleges, but the causal relationship is not there. That's just my commentary there. The consolidation is expected to achieve fiscal stability by fiscal year 28. Even though the net of faculty and staff positions over the last academic year is positive, because even though we had the peak of retirements in spring of 2022. Where am I? It's largely attributed in the report to guided pathways positions and staffing of the New Britain location. Page 11 portrays the strategic plan that's presented in this report as a draft, which will be revised and presented to the board by December 2022. So FAC requested some modifications to that draft strategic plan. And right before the meeting, I forwarded you some correspondence from Terry Brown, who basically says it's in the hands of President Meduco at the moment, and it will be modified as he sees fit and then approved by the board. Transitional governance has been sunset. We knew that, right? CCIC and SFASACC are all now no longer in I don't know, they're no longer meeting. So any program modifications for fall 2023 have to go through the new curriculum committee by March of 2023. And the target date for the new curriculum bodies to be operational is February 2023. And then nominations for College Senate should be gathered in September and October. Elections take place in November, should convene in December, and they are targeted to be fully operational by April. Has that started at any colleges yet? Okay. Not at Gateway either. And then there's going to be just no program review for the 22-23 year because it's considered a transitional year. Um, Acme Pilot at Scale is for 3 of the math pathways, but will, come into existence fall 2023. We knew that. Let's see what else. Diversity outcomes are finalized. I think most of us are aware of that. 3 advising crosswalk worksheets are introduced for legacy degrees, legacy TAP degrees, and legacy certificates. And it should be easily available on the website. Is anyone familiar with how to get access to those? Okay. All right. Let's see if there's anything else. Oh, right. There are 6 academic associates for scheduling and faculty workload who are going to be hired, and the director for scheduling and online programs was hired in April of 2023. And we now have standardized scheduling time blocks, which includes 5 days a week of common hours from 2 p.m. to 3:45 p.m. Let's see what else. The budget for the colleges is going to be showing at the consolidated level under CT state instead of the component unit model, but there's a lot more clarification under there. So I think we'll still be able to track where things go. And 181 guided pathways advisors officially hired. This application for single financial aid is submitted, expected to be approved by July 2023. And with the understanding that the approval might be provisional for a period of 1 to 3 years. Phi Theta Kappa will remain local to campuses. Student Activities Committee is working on common student orientation and this I find interesting. The President's Student Advisory Board is to be formed consisting of SGA members and student club representation from across all campuses. That is very similar to our current SAC, but not our current SAC. So I find that interesting just in terms of projecting potential changes for our statutorily, designed advisory committees. And then academic deans hired. The associate and assistant deans are that hiring is being held up by union negotiation, or I don't know if it's held up, but it's on pause while the unions are negotiating over department chairs. The expectation is that will be resolved by the end of this month. We will see. And the permanent vice president of diversity, equity, and inclusion began in 2023. As far as engaging those who were not fully supportive of consolidation, what's listed is that there were 2 all-college meetings at Asnuntuck and Tungsas and a series of webinars. I know that the webinars were very much like communication only flowed really in one direction. How were is anyone here from Tungsas? No. And then there were it was just 2 colleges out of 12. I don't know if they were particularly fruitful, but 2 out of 12. All right, so that is basically it in terms of like what to expect. We're basically on pause for a year, I guess, at the colleges. And a lot of the scheduling, etc., is happening centrally. And I don't know what provisional financial aid approval means, but apparently it'll be fine. So yeah, that's all I have for that in terms of just reporting what's in that report. Is there any discussion? Yeah.
Okay, Kalina, one of the things I saw in the next year report was that they hired an accounting firm to go through all the programs and determine their cost and their revenue production. Can we get more information from the board as what they intend to do with that information? Seems to me that it looks as if they are looking for data to determine which programs to terminate and which programs to continue. I just want to find out if that's actually was their intention in hiring this accounting company. The other thing that I'd like information on from the other representatives here is that some of our programs that are currently do not have external accreditation have been told that because there is external accreditation at their sister programs at other colleges, that they need to go through and get their programs accredited. The two that I know of here at Naugatuck Valley are hospitality and legal studies. The hospitality program coordinator has already put in her retirement because she does not want to go through this process for her program. And I've heard rumors that our legal studies a long-time coordinator is thinking of doing the same. So I just want to know, is that what is happening? Because early on in this whole process, we have ABET accreditation for our engineering programs, and our ABET, our engineering professors were very concerned because they felt as though this process was going to force them to terminate their ABET accreditation because other colleges didn't have it. It seems like, based upon what I'm hearing from these other two professors, that perhaps we're going in the opposite direction where everyone has to be accredited. So I'm just wondering what's happening at other institutions regarding external accreditation of programs.
All right, this is Lois. I can tell you it's a very mixed bag. At one point, our medical assistant program, which is accredited, was told it had to give up its accreditation. And we refused to give up the accreditation because our employers want the accreditation. And so they went back, and now they're telling people, the colleges that don't have those programs accredited, that they need to be accredited. So there's a meeting next Thursday. I know about specifically about the medical assisting program because it's just a huge disaster. And they seem to think that if we were to keep our accreditation and other people didn't have accreditation, then students could sue us for some reason. I don't know, the whole thing is totally bizarre. And I, yes, did hear the same thing with the paralegal and the hospitality is, we don't have accredited hospitality program, and they're pressing us to get that accredited. I think they haven't a clue what they're doing at all, and they're just making this up as they go along. So yes, Ron, they're pushing that, and I have to say that Norwalk was it was because we were so adamant about not giving up accreditation for our medical assisting program. They're now pressing other colleges to be accredited. None of this, it's all nonsense. I'm sorry, it's all nonsense.
Carmen has a hand.
Yeah, and kind of along the same lines that Ron has mentioned here, or actually with what you had mentioned here. So this year we're kind of on hold. So apparently there's no CAP meetings, I guess, at any of the college campuses, right? Curriculum budget. There's no changes in the curriculum, no changes in courses. Is that correct? Or that's what we were told at our departmental meeting. And then we had a question like, well, what if someone has to, what if we want to have a change in the course? Are we not allowed to do that anymore because we no longer have a CAP committee this year? Does anybody know anything about that?
And so you're talking about curriculum, right?
Right.
Curricular changes. Yeah. I mean, it seems to have been taken for granted because usually you have to make changes for the following academic year, right? So we're out of luck for this one. So anything you have to change according to this document needs to go through the new curriculum committee in March of 2023 for implementation in fall of 2023.
Okay.
And
All
it
right, so
should come into
basically-
existence in February of 2023.
Okay, so, okay, all right, so, all right, all right, all right, that sounds good. We were just curious about like, what's the next step? We want to make some changes to courses or something like that. So it sounds like this semester we're on hold, and then in March, I guess we can address it to the system. Okay.
Seems
all right.
that way.
All right. And then one other thing I just wanted just to clarify too, again, because these math classes that are starting fall 2023, there's no pilot courses, and they're like 6-hour co-requisite courses, either statistics, quantitative reasoning, or college level algebra. And I was just also, if anybody just curious, like whether or not this was going to be accepted by the four-year colleges. It doesn't seem, no one seemed to kind of know about that in our math department.
It's an interesting question.
We can ask and get back to you for the next meeting. I mean,
Okay.
normally there are placement exams, certainly at my university, at CCSU. So the question is, will the students who have passed one of the courses at the community college, will that be automatically accepted? Or will they in fact also have to go through the placement exam as is currently the policy? So it has implications.
Mhm.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That we're math people would like to know. I would like to know too. And maybe the numbers will be changed. Like quantitative reasoning is MAT 104, I think it is. And I know that CSU or Central doesn't take it. But I guess if they just change the number and add that co-requisite course that all of a sudden is college level, and are they being forced to take it? That was our understanding, that basically the four-year schools are being told, you have to take these courses. So find out, David. Yeah, we're still unsure about that.
Brendan may have something to add.
Yeah, I thought maybe we might want to look at or contact the transfer and articulation committee, the TAP, because there are agreements from sort of pre-students first about what will count in the 4 years. I had the same question though, like with these changes in the community colleges, do you have to redo the TAP or restart it? Because if the classes are changing, I mean, they might still equate to the same classes in the universities, but they might not. I just don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
So let's put a footnote on that one and get back for the next meeting. And we should check at all 4 universities.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll look into that.
Yeah. Because the new pathways are certainly distinct, but I believe the math work, and I think Mary Beth had her hand up for a second, because I think the math work groups were working with university faculty also. So
Yeah, I was just gonna report that I don't have an answer, and as far as I know, CMath, which is the math group, which is actually meeting right now, and so I couldn't join that today, but I don't believe that they have an answer at this
Okay.
point. So I think
that's a good question. All right. Anything else? I mean, there's been a lot of, sorry, go ahead, David.
Well, I just had a couple of things. I think we should write to Neshi about, the claim that the Faculty Advisory Council, right, has had significant input and by implication somehow approves the strategic plan. I mean, we already wrote a letter to the CSU leadership, but we can just reuse that and forward that on to Neshi. The other questions that I had, it's sort of typical that there is very little reference to, in fact, there's no reference to faculty control over curriculum and pedagogy. And that for me is a major principle. And without that, with the formulations that they have, say on page 15 about reviewing programs and their notion of stakeholders and the various euphemisms, participants and so forth. But the whole report studiously avoids any reference to the real input and decision-making capabilities of faculty. And so I think that's something that we need to draw to Neshi's attention as well. And it's reflected to some extent, or to a considerable extent, in the elimination of departments and department chairs at the level of the community colleges, and also in terms of the overall governance structure, where you have a curious arrangement whereby a curriculum committee, a relatively small one of just 18 faculty and then some additional individuals, whether voting or ad hoc or ex officio, for the very large number of different kinds of programs. And moreover, that curriculum conference, I believe they call it, or Congress, doesn't report to the college senate, which is, at least as far as the university's practices, a curious one, because that's a check and a balance on what the curriculum committee does by other faculty. And so they have them both reporting directly to the executive of the CSCC. So those are some of the things that that I noted, and I think we should write a brief letter to Neshi on those questions. I mean, one, there's no guarantee of the continued existence of the 12 community colleges once the merger has been, or the consolidation has been made, and that's something we talked about at last meeting, whether it involves a transitional period when the accreditations of the individual colleges are maintained, or if that's not possible, then some other clearly formulated statutory statement of the continued existence of those community colleges at the 12 locations currently there. And I think, secondly, the question of department chairs and departments at the community colleges, however that might be organized, taking into account the difference between small, medium, and large community colleges. That's also important, because the Neshi report only talks about a statewide department. Right? And I know that that's a matter currently under negotiation, so I defer to to Kalina, who might have better information on that. But that's another matter. I think we need to draw to Neshi's attention 3 or 4 key things: maintenance of the 12 community colleges, faculty control of curriculum and pedagogy, maintaining departments and department chairs at the colleges. Those are 3 that come immediately to my mind.
So David, I should mention that I know that I found in one of these presentations, I think it was one of these webinars, that the sort of independent pathways of curriculum in the Senate were characterized as being that way to ensure that the curriculum is the sole domain of faculty, so that it's a sort of a fully faculty dominated pathway that isn't subject to the Senate, that isn't necessarily as, full of faculty. So that's the way that it was characterized. I'll just say that, and I can dig up where I found it. And then I also want to mention this because it's related. Just in terms of, shared governance and communication, the webinars and the 2 all college meetings, the all college meetings at 2 of the 12 colleges were said to be remedies for the fact that there wasn't as much support from the college communities as one might like. But there's also reference to like a shared governance presentation in this Neshi submission. And the definition they take is from the Shared Governance Award, which the FAC sort of collaborated with the BOR to create. And that definition includes communication, collaboration, and mutual accountability. And I think it's that mutual accountability part and the genuine collaboration part that is sorely missing, because, certainly the webinars are a sort of one unidirectional communication, right? They're talking at us, and then any questions that members of the community have is moderated through the very folks holding the webinar, which does not allow for real sort of back and forth. So there's definitely reason to push on that. I think if that is the definition being used, I don't think that we are in any way satisfying it. Oh, I also want, as long as we're talking about this, I know that there was some conversation about the standardized schedule. One of the concerns is just this common hour, 5 days a week from 2 to 3:45. 5 days a week is quite a bit. One of the few things that I remember from Achieving the Dream at Gateway is that that's probably precisely the time that we have the most students in the building. And they want to be that's when they're available to take classes. So to block out that common hour 5 days a week seems difficult. I know that folks have talked about the difficulty of scheduling like lab classes around that. And then in addition, there are little local quirks, right? So like at Gateway, the local bus schedule will dictate whether or not students are going to be missing the first few minutes of class or leaving 15 to 20 minutes before classes because they have no other option if they take the bus, right? And that is going to matter. And local shift hours for industries in the area, I think, will matter. So I think there's more conversation to be had about that standardized schedule. I don't know if other people have input because I know it was kind of uncomfortable for a lot of folks. Okay, so clinical rotations, yeah. There's some incompatibility with those there.
Yeah, and they're struggling to get them now. So that was the hours they were doing it because that was discussed at our place too.
Yeah.
I might add, we had that at my university, 1 day a week, Tuesdays from 3 to 4:15 or something like this, right? And it turned out, or Thursdays, I can't recall now, but it turned out that it was intended so we could have common activities. But what happened is every department scheduled their meetings at that time, and nobody was available for a common activity. And moreover, we then had all those small problems that are just not so small problems, well, scheduling labs, which have to be 3 hours and that kind of a thing, all of which were interrupted to the point that eventually it was given up.
Mm. I always liked Three Rivers had lunchtime, which allows staff to participate if we have common activities too, which is nice. But all right, so that's it for that. I guess I can move on to, I think all there is to say about department chairs, we've already sort of endorsed the petition on department chairs, and unions are in negotiations with management about the extent to which we can modify the existing org chart. And so the unions have presented a pretty comprehensive proposal that kind of keeps everything with faculty, all responsibility for the sorts of things that department chairs do and program coordinators do now within faculty without giving it over to management. And management has countered with a counter proposal, and those have been circulating. The one thing that I would say about this process, because it's still you know, moving, it by no means finished, is just that it is my impression that to the extent that we can negotiate through the unions, what we are negotiating over is taking bargaining unit work away from bargaining unit members and giving it to management. But that is not the entirety of the problem, right? There is a structural problem too. So even if we reorganize certain job responsibilities, as long as there are a slew of, you know, a whole layer of management, vice presidents, et cetera, who are also responsible for all of the things that department heads currently do, not sure how impactful it actually is. So there is still more to be said by us. about the structural issues that would lead to real change, right? Because the problem still is that we are moving towards a more top-heavy corporatized structure. That structure remains in place, and then we're going to have folks who are attempting to continue to do the job that they used to have fully within their domain inside of that structure, which is simply, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. It's going to be quite frustrating, right? Because you don't actually have the power to do the thing other than bouncing it off of that level of management. And there is redundancy there. So, you know, I think there's more for us to say about that. Yeah, Ron.
Yeah, in the meantime, we have the flip side of that going on at Naugatuck Valley, where we have associate deans running divisions, and then the chairs reporting up to the associate deans. Those associate deans have now left to assume dean positions at the new college. And so our CEO sent an email out to all the department chairs and program coordinators, basically assigning them the work that the associate deans were doing. Right. So the board and in the system office is saying we don't need department chairs. And our CEO is saying, not only do we need department chairs, but I'm giving them the work that our management was doing because we no longer have management here at the college. It's just absolutely incredible.
All right. Is that it for community college stuff? Or rather consolidation stuff that falls under this? All right. Well, I'm good, David.
Okay, thanks. So I just want to preface my the report on the universities, and we're going to look at the situation at Western, because we said we'd look at that again. Also, you know, we're now entering the teaching in person without COVID measures, but still with COVID. So there's some questions that I think we need to discuss at that level. But I just want to make a general comment that though there are many problems, and I think we just looked at some of them with respect to the consolidation movement and students first, that if we look back at the last year and a half, there have been nonetheless significant changes in the Board of Regents and in the senior leadership at the system office level. And I'll just mention a few things. Firstly, a new chair of the Board of Regents, Joanne Ryan, who is well respected in the northwest of Connecticut, where she's been working for many years with businesses and community organizations. I think that's a positive step. We have a new president of CSCU. We all know that, Terrence Chang. But very different from the previous president of the CSCU, that the new president was chosen through a national affirmative action search. There was a faculty advisory committee, which in the particular case of the choice of Terrence Chang, agreed with the Board of Regents selection committee that he was indeed the best candidate. Whereas before we had a president of the CSCU who, though he was well connected, perhaps too well connected politically in the state, had no experience of public higher education. We now have, as president of the CSU, an individual who has gone through the ranks from assistant to associate and indeed even full professor, and has experience both at the UConn level and also back through New York State at CUNY. We have a number of new board members, two of whom are academics with experience, both of them, as it turns out, at CUNY as well, and two others with background in working with community groups. I think that's significant, and there's certainly been, to my estimation, improvement there in terms of the nominations that the governor has made to the Board of Regents. And we can see that in terms of, at least especially at the university level, notwithstanding some problems still left over at the community college level, in terms of the collective bargaining, whereas it was going extremely badly under the previous administration and with Andy Kripp as the chief management negotiator. The changes which were made by the new CSU president, in particular putting Ben Barnes in charge of negotiations, did result in concluding collective agreements which did not have the everything is on the table strategy, which, as you may recall, involved 0% increases over 3 years, rescinding a previous pay raise in 2019, 12 to 18 furlough days, and eliminating all university-wide faculty committees from academic freedom through sabbatical leave and promotion and tenure. So those were significant changes, assisted, one has to say, and certainly driven forward by the fact that those negotiations went up to the level of CBAC, where Danny Livingston, who was some sort of a magician, was in charge with many years' experience. And as well, we had a governor who was willing to award bonuses to all members in the public sector who had worked through the COVID and who has publicly stated and continues to support budget increases to cover pay raises that the unions are able to negotiate. So I think those are positive things. And I think we need to bear that in mind because there are some negative things. There are, I think, as well, some positive things, and that we have to properly balance what is happening and take into account these, what I consider to be significant changes that have occurred. That said, we said we would look at the situation at Western. Is Rutua here?
Yes,
Go ahead.
David,
There
I'm
you are. I
here.
see you now. Go ahead, Rutua.
Okay, thank you. I didn't get a chance to prepare something, but this should be quick update. So as I said at the previous meeting, that we formed 6 working groups to look at the various aspects of the university operations. And this past week and a half, so all the 6 groups had a meeting with management at Western, including Paul Barron, the new interim president. So well, I'll be short. I'll just the long and short of it is that they're not going to do anything. These groups were convened by the provost back in the spring semester, and basically these meetings concluded that the work and so this is what so I'm just going to give you some of the things that Barron said. He said one of the things he said is management controls the institution. So that's what he said. Management controls this institution. He will make decisions. He will listen to us, but he will make the decisions. That is expected, actually. I don't know why some of my colleagues seemed, they were surprised. I expected these meetings to be a farce, and they really were. But I think it could be a necessary exercise for faculty and staff, for workers to go through this, just to see that this was a farce. So then the question is, where are we going with this? So we have generated ideas. So the plan is, the union officers, we are going to split up and spread out and go to visit departments to discuss all this, the work that we did this summer, and then where we're going from there, how to move forward. And to make sure that this university, that Western is still here, and not just here, but also financially solvent, or on the path of financial solvency, I have to say, sometime next year. So now it's true that some of our, so we did produce some recommendations, and some of these recommendations are not going to be comfortable for some of us, for many of us, in fact, faculty and staff, but that's fine. We are invested in this university, and I think we do need to work together to save this university. We're putting, actually, one of the ideas we generated is this is our work, because we own this work, because we did it, and we've been really we've been talking now all the campus, the unions on the campus, and that's really great. We have 5 unions here. Well, one is really small, the campus security, the campus police local. That's very small, that they support us too. But we have AUP, which is the biggest union by far, and for that reason, actually for 3 reasons. AUP is the biggest union by far at this university. The second is we have the best protection, and third is without faculty there will be no university. So we need to lead this. AUP needs to lead this fight. So AUP, SWOV, that's the second biggest, and we have, I think, a local of AFSCME, clerical workers, and then a local of CUI, which is a union of maintenance and facilities workers. We've been working together this summer, and we're going to continue doing that. So one of the ideas we generated is to summarize all the work and our recommendations, and in infographics, flyers, and we use them to talk to students and the public, and also to talk to the press. Another idea we have is to hold a press conference. Again, this is best if done with all unions on campus. Because the administration doesn't want to share our work publicly, pretty much. So we're going to do it because it's our work. So we're also we're preparing to file a FOIA request. Sending a FOIA request itself is like a 2-second thing, but we want to be as specific as possible. So we're putting together a list of data, very specific data requests that we're going to send. So that's also, that's what we're going to do. And also, so NCHAMS is here. We're going to talk to NCHAMS. NCHAMS is going to talk to various groups on campus. So this time they plan to talk, or try to talk. I don't know how meaningful this discussion is going to be. But they're going to, they set up meetings with pretty much every group on campus. So I think I have 2 meetings with them. So with AUP members who are involved in the working group, so there were about 50 of us, So that's on Monday and Tuesday, actually, 2 meetings. And university standard reps are also going to meet with them. So we're trying to figure out, we're going to have a meeting before the meeting, of course, the prep meeting, basically to the AUP members, that is. We're going to prepare for these meetings because I think we need to think about what do we want to achieve with meeting with NCHAMS. But I'm not sure, actually, I think this is maybe, if anybody has ideas, um, I'm listening, that would be great. But because we're not sure because this is, with management here, it's clear we need to put public pressure on them. We need to put pressure on them. And we're working actually on PSAs also. That's another idea we have, to turn all this work into PSAs, send them to, all on social media platforms, and educate the public about it. Because a lot of people in Danbury actually don't know what's going on. Of course, the challenge is to make it a positive message so that, oh my gosh, Western is closing. It's not that, but we're fighting for Western, and faculty and staff are working together to fight for to save Western, to make sure Western is here for the city of Danbury, for our students. So something like that. And the management, this was a huge mismanagement, and we need to hold them accountable, and we need to put this university on the path of financial solvency. So something along those lines. So this, of course, these are all ideas for now, but we're working together to make some, if not all of them, happen, to put pressure on management. So that is pretty clear, the plan for management. But we're not sure about ANCHAMS, and so the BOR is, by the way, the BOR spent about $150,000, I think, last year on ANCHAMS to come here, talk to management, and then produce the report that all of you have seen. The second part is this semester, the BOR is spending almost $200,000 on ANCHAMS, to pay ANCHAMS consultants, come here, do more interviews, do more analysis. And I think the deadline for their report is sometime in November. So they don't have a lot of time, actually. So that's what I can report for now.
Thanks. That really does help to keep us up to date. I go back long enough. So I started off at Central in 1989. And I wonder if David Stoloff has been around that long, or nearly that long. So I don't want to put him on the spot. But I do remember around 91, 92, Eastern Connecticut State University was in a situation rather similar, although details, of course, are different. In particular, they didn't have a divided campus, which is a geographically divided campus, which is an additional consideration. But there was talk that Eastern was on the edge, that it was at a deficit, that it burned through its reserves and so forth. And I don't know the details of what happened. I was just a new untenured faculty member trying to figure my way around the university at the time, but I certainly paid attention to the fact that faculty and staff at Eastern took up the challenge. They were considerably assisted by the fact that David Carter became the president, who had been dean of their School of Education. And he was able to, with the faculty and staff, stabilize the financial situation of the university. And by all reports, Elson Nunez has taken that forward. So that, this is not a unique situation, and it's not the end of the world. I mean, it's good to hear that all of these measures are now being taken at Western. And I see David is ready to say something, so go ahead.
Well, I didn't come until 1995, so I guess I'm a newbie compared to you. David Carter was from UConn, and there's always the problem that Easton is geographically near UConn. The way our university has solved the issue, although there's always talk about why do we have a university here, is that we created a niche for ourselves. And as a public liberal arts college, that's what we call ourselves, Connecticut's only public liberal arts college. And increasingly, we're becoming Connecticut's most diverse university. And that's the niche now. A place like Western is always going to be vulnerable. It's smaller. The way it saved itself in the past is that there were no other universities in that part of the region, uh, except for SUNY New Paltz, right? And that they're a bit distance, and they did do well with getting people from New York to go across the border and study with them. They're very close to New York City, so geographically, that's important. Those are important things that they can build up. I mean, the real problem is it's been administrative mismanagement, and that's the problem in the entire system, right? I mean, that's what we talk about every time we talk about how there's administrative bloat, and that's really the problem with Western. It was administrative bloat, not faculty, administrative bloat. But the way to save these campuses are for them to become unique, because students can stay home and get their degrees. They don't have to go anywhere anymore. Easton has become a residential campus, built with buildings. And so that's one way of saving Easton. But we're always threatened, and it wouldn't surprise me. The problem with Easton is also that if Easton was to close, Willimantic would close. It's the only, it's a major generator of economics in this region. So and Elsa Nunez has helped a great deal because she is what we used to call glamorous ethnic, and someone who has a really historic. She was an historic pick for our position. I was on the search committee. Historic person to lead us, and she's led us into diversity. And so I don't think that Easton's on the chopping block. They're very careful about the budget. But I think we've established a niche.
Yeah, you know, the situation of the universities, and for that matter, the community colleges, but let's talk about the universities in particular, is always a difficult one. We're public institutions of higher education, which are largely dependent upon student tuition and fees and funding from the state. Even though there is a limited amount of money which comes in terms of research funds and other funds, and even though the universities have endowments, those are relatively small compared to, say, what exists in the private sector. And so consequently, we're really dependent, or we're really easily influenced by the rise and fall of the economics and the economy surrounding us. And consequently, I thank David for bringing up the experience of Eastern, and with what Rotu has said, I think, you know, the Western faculty and staff are on their way to replicating the kind of thing that has been done at Eastern. And that we should, I think, be positive in terms of our prospects for the future. But as they say, be positive, but be organized. Are there other comments about Western? So we'll continue to follow. Go ahead, Samantha.
Yes, I just want to add, I think we're going, so this is fiscal year 23, and we're going to have an estimated $18 million negative reserves for next year. Now, the good news is somehow the BOR decided to lift the hiring freeze, but just for some administrative positions and some clerical positions, because a lot of administrators who lost their secretaries because of retirement, now they can hire them again, which I agree with that, because really secretaries, clerical workers don't make much, and they are very instrumental in making sure everything goes smoothly on a daily basis. But as both David said, has the administrative bloat that we need to worry about, and that's, yes, and so that should be the focus. In fact, one of our groups, our analysis showed that we were able to refute the majority of statements in the ANCHAM's report about that the problem, one of the main problems is higher labor cost, specifically instructional cost. And we were able to show that actually that's not true. In fact, the instructional cost has been flat most of the last 10 years. So that's not where it's coming from. But we think it's really partly because of the higher cost of living here. So in Fairfield County, it's on average, I think the salaries at Western, because it's in the Fairfield County, actually the average is higher than the average salaries at the other CSUs. But that's a necessity. So thank you so much, David. David Stoloff and David Blitz for your feedback, and I'll keep you posted about this.
Good, thank you, too. And we'll have it again on our next meeting as well, so it'll be a continuing item. The other issue, COVID. As I said at the beginning, I mean, it's a unique situation for us now, but of course, every term has a unique situation these days. We are without COVID measures or explicit COVID measures, but we still have COVID. And so I think it's important. I circulated the staff report, which was associated with the executive committee resolution that was passed at its last meeting. And as you may recall, the staff report simply just summarized in one page without any facts or figures that we'd passed through a season of COVID along with the vaccine mandate and the various other mandates, without, however, any data whatever as to, for example, how many clinics were held at the community colleges, at the universities, what was the rate of COVID infection at the various institutions, what were the problems involved with non-medical exemptions, and so forth. The resolution, as I mentioned at our last meeting, was improved by an amendment by one of the members of the board, the chair of the ASA committee, Ira Bloom, which specified that not only are we looking to the governor and the legislature for whatever measures are to be taken during the 2022-2023 academic year, but that also the president of the CSCU and his executive committee have responsibility for system-wide measures. What I'm looking for, and which I'm going to insist upon, is that we get more data from the system office as to what actually transpired in the last 2 years. And the reason is not to complain or blame. I'm not interested in that. I don't think any of us are interested in that. The question is to know what happened, what worked, and what didn't. Right? Because the problem is it's going to happen again. We don't know when or how, but already there is a public health emergency with respect to the so-called monkeypox. We didn't expect COVID-19 to hit, but we had a COVID epidemic back in 2003, 2004. And we know, for example, at the level of the federal government, that some measures had been taken and documents had been prepared in case this happened again, which the incoming, I believe it was the Trump administration, simply discarded and then had to start from scratch. We don't want to start from scratch again. Should there be a COVID variant which somehow escapes the vaccines, that's always possible, although certainly we hope that that doesn't happen, or if there is some other pandemic that occurs. And so consequently, we need a lot more information about what transpired so that we can prepare and have ready the framework of measures that could be taken should there be a more deadly variant or some other pandemic. So that's something I'm going to follow up on. I'll make the request. We had a resolution which we passed. I sent it along to the folks in the system office, but I did not get any explicit response in terms of providing the data and the information that we want. So I'll make that request again, and if necessary, go through freedom of information. But I think that we have to have that, not so that we can play the blame game. I think we've we've graduated from that. But rather so that we can be better prepared. Lois.
I just want to make the point that there was an article in a paper today that said that the Connecticut school system has got 3 times the rate of COVID that they had in the first 2 weeks of classes last year. So it's 3 times more they've had so far this year.
Yeah, we're only into the second week of classes. And I think for our next meeting, we should do a round table to find out what is happening at the various constituent institutions in terms of the prevalence of COVID again.
I can tell you Norwalk's doing nothing.
Other comments? All right, other issues related to universities. Well, you know, the situation at Western always sort of brings up worst case scenarios, right? Are they going to close the institution? Are they going to somehow use that as a pretext or excuse to consolidate the universities and so forth? And so I took the opportunity to directly pose that question both to the president of the CSCU and to the chair of the Finance and Infrastructure Committee. And with their permission, the response was the following from the president of the CSCU. He has no plan nor any intention of consolidating the universities. And the following statement from the chair of the Finance and Infrastructure Committee, that if that matter were to come up at the board, he would strenuously oppose it. So I think that's something that we need to just, sometimes, you know, as faculty and staff for that matter, we think of the worst case scenario. And certainly that's always, you know, a possibility. But I think we need to take this off the table so that we can focus more on what are the positive things that we can do in terms of improving recruitment, retention, and graduation at the universities and at the colleges, closing the achievement gap, permitting our students to fully pay for their education, and having full funding for the various institutions, both colleges and universities, for the system as a whole. So I just wanted to make those comments in order to clear up that issue. Well, there are now 2 further points we have on the agenda. One is the update on the FAC conference, and the other is the next joint meeting of the FAC and the BOR. Do we have an update for the FAC conference? If not,
We haven't met since the last meeting. I don't think there's really anything for the small group of us to do until there's a decision made as to what the plan for the fall is. We sort of presented, I think Diane presented the discussions that they had over the summer. I wasn't able to join them for that meeting. But I think we were just at, you know, our recommendation was some kind of sort of easy to do virtual, just short, something for the fall to just let people know about the FAC and maybe 1 or 2 topics that are going on, and then maybe try to plan something more formal for the spring. So I think that was where we left off last meeting.
Actually, Diane couldn't make this meeting. She told me to mention if it was asked. She actually did send an email saying if we, the group should meet for the conference, but she haven't heard back.
I think we lost you, Boo.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
Dan couldn't make this meeting, but she did mention she sent an email either to the group that was on FSC or to Kalina to schedule a meeting and when we should meet, but she haven't heard back.
Yeah, she has followed up. So hopefully we can all meet soon. and figure out what we're going to do.
But I think that the format that's suggested, which is, I mean, it could be a hybrid meeting too. We could, in fact, depending upon the COVID prevalence, meet in person along with an online component. I mean, I've done that for a conference that I organized over the summer, and it's a bit more extra work, but it's possible to do that. So that's just something I want to suggest. And secondly, if we could take just a few of the most essential issues that are being discussed now, particularly with respect to consolidation of the community colleges. That might be, if we limit ourselves to 2 or 3 issues. For example, guarantees of the continued existence of community colleges at their current locations, faculty control of curriculum and pedagogy. It seems to me that that could be a sufficient content for something organized in a perhaps morning session or morning and afternoon session. But time is drawing near. Now we're just at the beginning of September. We should have some specific proposal for our October meeting. And really at that point, the conference should be scheduled towards the end of October, or at the very latest, the beginning of November.
David, I'll just mention something, because I was there with Diane. We were talking about just having some very simple virtual meeting for the, end of October, beginning of November. That would basically maybe even an hour and a half, just covering some of the points you mentioned there, like what's going on with ACME, like what's going on with the math, what's going on with faculty governance, or even with just things that have to do with consolidation, 2 or 3 things that could just be virtual. That just is kind of a teaser for people to kind of be more aware of what the faculty advisory committee, and just finding 2 or 3 people who would be willing to talk about a couple of those issues, just something simple like that we're just doing right now, but just trying to invite all the college campuses. And then the idea was to see that, and then was to kind of see if we want to do something that would be more like at one of the 4-year schools, this be more formal, where people actually go to one of the 4-year colleges. And then that planning would have to be started in April or whenever it would be in the spring. And we didn't really know, for instance, if there was any money allotted. So we were kind of putting things on hold. But the idea was to go forward with something in the fall, end of October, just maybe 2 or 3 people talking for 20 minutes or so about some of those key points you mentioned. And so anyway, that was, yeah.
Well, I suggest we agree to do that.
Okay.
And we could do it entirely virtually in that case, with planning for sort of a hybrid meeting in the spring, as you suggest.
Right.
So is that a general feeling that we should go ahead, plan this for a morning session? Would morning be better than afternoon? Whatever. So either a morning or an afternoon session, say at most 2 to 3 hours, with 2 to 3 speakers on some of the key questions involved in the situation of the community colleges. Right. And we could add something about Western. I think we should add something about the situation at Western,
Okay.
Which would be relevant for the universities. And aim then as our objective to include a larger number of people than just the delegates and the alternates to the FAC, make this open to all members of the community at large.
Right. And I kind of talked about this, that I was kind of hoping that we could have a contact at each college. So for instance, after these faculty advisory committee meetings, that we could send them, say, the minutes from the previously approved minutes, and just keep sending these out to people at the colleges so they have an idea of what FAC is about. So if they get an invitation to a conference, that they've had some exposure to this. So my thought is, when I get these minutes, I send the minutes out that were approved to the community college, to Capital Community College, employees there. And so, a lot of them, sometimes kind of wait to see what the minutes are and are curious to see what the FAC has to say. So anyway, but it would be good if all the colleges did that so people know what FAC is about.
add to that the universities. I'll certainly do it. I hadn't thought of doing it, but I will do it on
Right.
Monday and
Right.
send it to the folks at CCSU. So
Okay, great.
let's make that as a recommendation.
Okay.
Jennifer?
I was under the impression that our role as an FAC member was to take notes and report back to our faculty senates or faculty councils, and then also send the minutes ideally. And so when I first heard this idea, it was interesting to me because I was thinking, well, hopefully the campuses are all tuned in to what happens, because I think the idea with the new structure was that there was a representative from every campus. So you can correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but I love the idea. I don't think it probably would be redundant to the presentations individual FAC members give to their senates, because I think the conversation would be more robust. But one of the things CSET does in trying to have a conference that's not a long all-day conference is we have what we call conversations. And I was just thinking that maybe if it's not too much work for the presenters, what might be an interesting concept would be to think of what the 3 themes are going to be that will be covered, and maybe ask folks to send in a question under a title so that the presenters can see if they can skim through the questions and maybe try to answer some of those for the actual live audience coming. You know, something super simple where it's like, this is the presenter, this is the topic. If you have one question, send it to that person. It may or may not be answered, but it, you know, and then you can see if there's themes that come up from the audience. So it's more interactive, even though it's a short session. Just an idea, but I know that's cumbersome. So thanks.
Can we decide on the 3 themes right now? Or should we simply ask the committee to come back and be authorized to determine the 3 themes for a virtual conference to be held in a, say, a morning 9 to 12 session at the end of October or beginning of November at the latest, including a 4th item, namely the situation at Western? Mike?
I would suggest that we suggest themes to them and let them pick. I mean, they are, in other words, a kind of compromise between the two. You know, we don't pick them for them, but we just pick a few and say, these are some suggestions, but do what you want. That's what I would do, because they're doing the work on it.
Okay, great.
I agree, Mike. And also in terms of timing, I mean, there's so many conferences happening in October, at least on the English side. But if you were going to do November, I think it would have to be the 4th, because then we have Veterans Day, and then the next Friday is the week before Thanksgiving. So I think attendance wise, taking a look at November 4th would be optimal, just as a suggestion as one of the possible dates.
Is that a Friday? I'm sorry, is
Yes.
November the 4th?
Yes, it is Friday. It's the first for Friday in November.
What we could certainly do today is decide on that date and requesting that you bring forward 3 themes that would be part of the agenda, along with the situation at Western.
I mean, it really seems like a lot of people have questions about the organizational structure and department chairs and things like that. So I think that's a big one. And it would be interesting to see the types of questions that come in. But I don't know, you know, I can't see a presenter really in 20 minutes being able to break down and answer all the questions, but maybe we could pose more questions as a part of this type of sorry, I'm talking a lot, but okay, I'm not on the committee, so but I just
No, thank you. So we were thinking like having someone from Acme speak on, you know, basically what's going forward, because there's so many people, even people on the committee are still confused, to be honest with you, like what actually is happening with the math and English. That would be one huge thing that we were thinking about. Another one could be the department chair situation, but that it might be something that we don't quite know the resolution. But that's fine. Maybe just kind of say, so far, this is what's being decided upon. What about those 2? And then, I mean, anything else? I mean, just feel free to kind of put some things in there, and I can speak to Diane and Mary Beth too about this.
Yeah, I mean, one last comment and then I'll stop talking. I'm sorry. So is that I think if we consider our audience and we want faculty involvement and participation and more robust discussion and for them to understand what we're representing, I think that once you have an Acme representative on the agenda as a speaker, it can maybe make some, you know, I think we've all heard a lot of acne presentations, and they're almost always a spin of this is why it's good, right? And I'm not saying we're looking for reasons it's not good, but I'm just saying that, like, I think we have enough graphs and charts to kind of interpret the plan. But I think what we're trying to arrive at is what are some things that we can anticipate where we're all having the same worries, and how can we address people's concerns? Does that make sense? Or like, I think we need to have the faculty as our audience in our mind's eye.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was hoping to get a faculty member on ACME that could talk about some of these things moving forward here. Yeah. Yeah.
I say, Carmen, wouldn't it be more appropriate, like, so we get presentations from, like, there are these webinars that go on that would be the updated information on these things. So if we can start with that and then have a conversation around it that isn't so much informational, we're going to take for granted that we've gotten the information from system office. And then what are the conversations that still, like, the issues that still need to be resolved with around faculty that might make, is that sort of like what you mean, Jen? Like, so that it's not where are we, but where do we hope to be, or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be an interesting thing, for example, if, you know, we got 52 email replies where people express concern about not having a department chair for one particular reason, and we can kind of figure out what are some of the underlying issues so that we're hearing from everyone's voice. Because while it's very effective for this body to present back to our campus bodies, I don't necessarily know that we have many mechanisms or opportunities to come back and really discuss how our, you know, what the campus is feeling about, you know, different things. So it might be a unique opportunity to capture those voices.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, any other, I mean, I'm basically, we were thinking more about just to try to, like, there's a lot of faculty who are just still very unsure of what's going forward with English and math. Those are the two things I keep mentioning, but I just mentioned some stuff with math that no one seems to know the answer to. And, you know, if we can try to get some answers to some of these things, like, will the four-year colleges be accepting these things, or these classes as they go, these 6-hour co-requisites? Just some basic questions that were being asked over and over again, and we're never getting an answer. But I like your idea, Jen, of just soliciting questions regarding that, you know, like department chairs, what's going on with English, what's going on with math, you know, whatever it might be, and we can think of some, and then just asking faculty member. I like your idea about saying just submit this stuff to whoever is making that presentation there.
And maybe that's the hour. Maybe that's it. I mean, maybe there aren't 3 themes in 20 minutes. Maybe it's because that's going to fly by, right?
Right, exactly. And again, we were thinking, like, at the most 2 hours, like, you know, at the most 2-hour meeting there, just kind of a teaser for the fall or for the spring conference. But if you guys think it should be longer than that, you know, that's, I mean, if you feel like, I just worry if it's a little too long and people are not going to just attend it. You know, if it's an hour and a half, it's going to be more likely people actually listen.
Mike?
I think the best idea is, as you're suggesting, a short one, maybe 2 hours, in order to raise 3 big issues that can't be finished. But you have a bigger teaser if you have 3 big issues than 1 big issue.
Right.
So, you know what I mean? Like maybe 30 minutes or 40 minutes per topic of these complicated topics. And then some people, that would seem to me to get people's interest in wanting to show up in the spring with a more thorough discussion and you know, whatever discussion of those complicated issues. But that's just a suggestion.
No, I like that.
But I think we're moving towards a sort of somewhat fuzzy consensus here, that we want to do it on November the 4th on a Friday. We wanted to have it 2 hours. We want to have 3 themes. One would be ACME, one would be department chairs at the community colleges, and the third one I think should be the situation at Western, which is a university one. And we can go on from there. And then you decide the methodology. Do you want to ask for questions at large, or how do you want to do it?
Okay.
The exact timing, that would be left up to you. But then we can make a decision today.
Okay, great.
Move forward. So I would put that as a motion, simply, that we have the conference on November the 4th, that there be 2 hours, that there be 3 themes, ACME, department chairs, and the situation at Western.
Okay.
Mike?
I just have one question for Carmen. Do you think Diane would be okay with this? I don't want to be stepping on her toes too much. What do you think?
I honestly feel like she probably would be okay with this because she seems like she's been really busy. And I
Okay,
think,
just-
you know, I think she would solicit, we could just kind of put this as a proposal going forward. And, you know, if she has some issues with it, we could get back to you, but I honestly don't think she would. I think,
Well,
yeah.
In that case, I'll second what David's suggesting.
I'll also bring it back to Diane as well, just so she's aware, but I think she's open to it.
And with the understanding that we can make modifications, depending on any concerns that you might have. Okay, any other further discussion?
Yeah, so since we've decided on sort of themes, and you know, Jen has this idea that we can source questions or issues that folks would like us to talk about or focus on. Should we also suggest that each of us sends a note to our colleges asking for that so that we can collect them and have them before October and get a sense of what we're doing?
Sure.
All that could be in the methodology of application of the resolution. But I don't think we need to explicitly mention that, but that would follow.
I mean, I would probably put this in the save the date. I would probably put the questions with each presenter's email and people can send it to them directly as the,
Okay.
you know what I mean? Instead of,
Okay, so not in advance, but okay, gotcha.
yeah.
I mean,
But I would
that's
do
the
the
next
save the
big-
date soon.
Right. And the next big thing is who would be fine to talk about Western, who are we going to find to talk about Acme, and who would be fine to talk about department chairs. That's another big thing we should get right away. If people have an idea of someone they think, oh yeah, this is a person. I really don't know. I could try to find around for Acme. But I mean, I'm not sure if the person who just spoke would want to speak about Western and who would be good to speak about department chairs. But if anybody has any ideas, please say it so I can contact these people and see if they'd be willing to kind of share this for those three topics.
Okay. Any further discussion? If not, I'll just call for a vote. Oh, sorry, Ritua.
Sorry, David, I just want to add that I talked to our Western's rep for FAC. His name is Rob Whittemore, and you know he was elected last May. Just want to make sure that he's on your radar because he hasn't received any communication about FAC. Yeah, so
Would you send me his email?
sure, I can do that.
Yeah, and I'll make sure that that's added. I'm sorry, that's a mistake on my part.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, so the resolution having been moved and seconded, those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. We move on to the next issue, which is the joint meeting of the FAC and the BOR. Now, we had one meeting which lasted an hour, and there was one issue presented by the FAC and one issue presented by the board, and we left it at that. But the requirement in the statutes, section 185, is at least biannual meetings. So it seems to me that we should now make a further request of the board to have this joint meeting. The more so that there's a new chair of the board and new members of the board. I think it would be an occasion to get to better know each other, to develop perhaps a somewhat greater level of understanding and as a consequence, trust. But what we need to come up with are one or two suggestions for what we would like to have discussed. And the idea would be to organize that in the fall. Perhaps I should have brought this up before we discussed the conference because we've run out of ideas. Yes, Brandon.
Yeah, I just would like to hear some more about the work being done to restore public funding to all our campuses. When I made some comments to the BOR at some point over the summer, I dug back into the history of funding for Eastern, and it's just a lot lower than it used to be. I think probably one of the things that's maybe helped the community colleges with, enrollments has been, the new funding systems that have been put in place. And so, I kind of would like to know if there's any work being done by the regents or the central office to advocate for our system and bring back public funding to where it used to be.
That is a role for the board. I think you're quite correct in that respect. And we could have, I think, a discussion. This is on the issue of full funding for public higher education, which is, one of the issues to which we are committed. So we could certainly take that forward as our suggestion.
Could ask, especially since we've both Brendan and Ratua here. I'd hope that it would be a project of sort of, we say full funding, but sort of naming what that means. What exactly does that mean? Is it a sort of percentage of expenditures? Is it like, what does it mean? And then what is that number? Because I think, if we want to strongly advocate for it, it's hard when we don't know what we're asking for. And I'd hope that we could kind of engage with, system office to figure that out. And they've expressed willingness, and I think I've felt inadequate to the task. And I wonder, do you see that as productive? Do you feel that we would know what to ask? Because it seems to me that it's also a ever moving target. Like there's always an emergency, there's always something shifting in the background. So, just getting clearer on what full funding means would be really useful for me. And I don't know if that's a project for us to do some conceptual analysis on, or a project for us to dig into the data with the system office. But any thoughts on what the right path forward on that is, or are we, is there a path there?
I'd like to say something about that, actually, Karina. I'm sorry, what? Did you say something?
No,
Yeah,
sure.
go ahead.
So Brandon actually has been looking into this a lot, I know, in the past few years. But I just, he can probably talk more about this. But I do want to mention an idea that I think in the first year of the pandemic in 2020, a lot of schools, colleges, and universities used the pandemic as an excuse to implement budget austerity. And some faculty at some of these schools did fight, and they did some kind of a, so this is the concept is called alternative budgets. Basically what they did was to, first they looked at all these financial statements, and it's easier to do this for public colleges and universities, which we are. And then, because all these are public information, so they did some kind of forensic accounting, basically using those statements, and FOIA anything, any drill down data. And so what they did is forensic accounting, take out all the waste and reimagine what can happen. And you can do it in two ways. First is to, just identify the waste, take it out, and use it on, say, adding more lines, offer scholarship, and so on. The second way is to, what if we have more public funding, more state funding, something like that. So Ohio, I know Ohio University did this very, very well. And I have some, I think I have all their files that they published based on their work, which I can share if you're interested. But this is actually something that I would love to get involved, or at least, to be able to contribute to.
Well, it looks like we have a topic. And I think, and we have some economists. which is even better. And so I would propose then that we request a joint meeting of the BOR and the FAC for the fall 2022 term, and our suggestion for a topic. And in fact, that might be sufficient for the whole hour, although I think we need more than an hour. So I think we should specify that it should be longer than 1 hour on the question of full funding for public higher education. What measures have been taken up to now, and what we can do jointly in order to press that forward. I'm assuming, the results of the November elections are consistent with what we have already. What we know is that the governor has stated that he will support and has supported increases in budget to take into account and to pay for contractual pay increases. But that only gives us stasis. We're just paddling in place. And so let's look at that issue. And that's what I would suggest if I may make a motion again, that the FAC request of the BOR a joint meeting in the fall of 2022 on the issue of full funding for public higher education in the state. Is there a second? Kalina? Okay, any further discussion? If not, I'll call for a vote. Those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Well, we are now at the stage called other business, which is preparatory to the even better stage of adjournment and next meeting. Are there other matters that members of the committee wish to bring forward? If not, could I entertain a motion to adjourn? And our next meeting is in October. Kalina, do you happen to call the date in October?
Let me see if I can.
It's October 9th. No, it's not. It's October
7th.
7th.
Okay, well, that's coming up. We won't be apart for very long. Single-digit meetings or single-digit number meetings. All right. With that, those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Hey,
And those who wish to stay on,
stay forever.
stay forever. I am going to end the recording, and we are adjourned until next meeting. Thank you very much all for your participation. I think we really had a fruitful meeting and discussed a number of major issues and made some decisions that we can move forward on. That said, I'm going to stop the recording now.
Thanks, David.